So we're really going to focus on how can we actually create environments that have two things, support within them and also clarity. And the reason why I really wanted to talk to you about this is because in the charity sector, there is such a balance that is happening at the moment. There's such high emotions.
The first thing is in terms of being really clear about what the service is that you're providing, what you're trying to support people with. And I think that, people might have a perception or a thought about what you might do. And actually that clarity around this is what we're here to do, this is what we're here to deliver, this is what our purpose is. I think all charities, are looking to get that nailed, which means that people externally looking in on a better understanding as to, is the service they offer what the right one for me and the right thing for me. So I think that's our kind of start point for the external audience.
Hello and welcome to the Plum Pod, where we talk about all things HR and mental health. I'm your host, Georgia, and founder of Access HR. On today's episode, I'm joined by Souza as we discuss his inspiring career within the charity sector. As the Executive Director of People and Culture at the Samaritans, Souza shares how organisations can develop scalable environments that balance both supportive cultures with operational clarity. Souza, hi.
Hello, it's great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me. This is a conversation I've been really excited for, and it's definitely one that a lot of people have got on their radar, and I'm hoping that this then episode is the one that they listen to. More will come as we definitely get into it, but first of all, there is a question that I love to ask every single guest. The reason I ask it is it really just sets the scene. Potentially people don't know about your background, and they absolutely should. So the question is, was HR part of the plan, or did this happen by chance?
I'm definitely one of the accidental people.
Tell me more. I love stories like this.
So I don't know, I wanted to be a lawyer. So that was my plan. I was going to be a lawyer. And then I ended up working in sports volunteering at my university, became sports president, saving up the money to then do my law conversion degree. And then at the end of it, I was like, no, actually, do you know what? I really want to work in sport. And I wrote my dissertation on volunteering in sport, and that's what the first job I got was volunteering in sport.
And correct me if I'm wrong, with England netball.
Yeah, so I was head of volunteering at England netball. So that's where I started, and then I think over time it wasn't the sport that was the thing; it was the volunteering thing that was the driver. Had a few career moves, ended up at NSPCC, had a brilliant manager there, and she said, "I see a organisational development consultant in you. I see that you could be more than just a volunteering person." And that was the point where I broadened out from volunteering to being a wider HR person. But yeah, I had no plan. I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. I just kind of fallen into it and been fortunate that I've met the right people at the right times that have guided me on the journey to where I am now.
And when you transitioned into that first people role, what did that look like?
So the actual proper first people role was when I was at National Trust. And so I started off there as, I came in there as a volunteering side, volunteering, participation and inclusion. And the inclusion bit was a thing I've never done that. And wouldn't it be amazing to do that at an organisation like National Trust? And then obviously COVID happened. And we needed to, think about restructuring and, how does the organisation need to be shaped? And at that point, my then boss was like, actually, we want everyone to have responsibility for volunteering. And so I then evolved into being a broader, so I became, what was my role there? I can't even remember what it was called now, but I had a wider remit. So I had recruitment, inclusion, reward and recognition and those kinds of things. So I had a wider people remit, and that then was the catalyst to then me getting the job at Samaritans.
And that's exactly why you are the perfect guest for today's conversation. So we're really going to focus on how can we actually create environments that have two things, support within them and also clarity. And the reason why I really wanted to talk to you about this is because in the charity sector, there is such a balance that is happening at the moment. There's such high emotions, but also we've got resource constraints and then being a mission-driven purpose organization. And how do we balance that all alongside burnout? And with your experience, this is where I just know for our conversation today, you are the best person for me to speak to. And I really want to start off, first of all, by understanding how can we start to navigate internal teams, but also public perception of charities and expectations?
Yes, I think the first thing is in terms of being really clear about what the service is that you're providing, what you're trying to support people with. And I think that, people might have a perception or a thought about what you might do. And actually that clarity around this is what we're here to do, this is what we're here to deliver, this is what our purpose is. I think all charities, I think, are looking to get that
Mhm.
nailed, which means that people externally looking in on a better understanding as to, is the service they offer what the right one for me, and the right thing for me. So I think that's our kind of start point for the external audience. I think internally, I think there are sometimes questions and challenges for people coming into an organization like ours about, what are we both trying to deliver and trying to achieve, but also what role we're asking them to play, and
Mhm.
how they can meaningfully support us to deliver that, but also be consciously and acutely aware of the potential personal impact it might have on them.
Mhm.
So we have loads of people who come to us because they've got lived experience, because they feel passionately about what we do. Um, and I think we have a responsibility at the point of attraction to be really clear to those people about what it is they're signing up for. And that when they come to work for an organization like ours, there is a likelihood or a potential they might be exposed to things they might find triggering, that they might find challenging, and that we will, try to provide the right support mechanisms for them to help them with that. But I think sometimes, I mean, I've worked my whole career in charities. People sometimes don't fully comprehend
Mhm.
the personal impact until they're in, and then you're then left with that real difficult situation of feeling like if I leave, I've failed. I've let myself down and the cause down, and I can't. But actually staying, I might be doing myself some harm.
I absolutely loved just then when you were talking about attraction, that you're really intentional when candidates are coming through to the reality of what it actually means to be part of the Samaritans. Because I think a lot of organizations where they go wrong is they're not clear during that hiring strategy. Then when people get on the inside, they feel a potential disconnection. By the sound of it, you're being really honest and transparent with people.
I, I think we're trying to. So I say there's more that we can do, and I think it's something
Mhm.
that we're looking at, because I think also when people enter into that process, actually the point we start to talk to people meaningfully about what it might be
Mhm.
is once they're already into the process. So they've already made a decision. And therefore, I think a bit of interpersonal bravado kind of like takes over, and people are kind of like, yeah, that won't be a problem. Yeah, I'll be fine with that. Yes, I'll be okay. And so I feel what we are looking to try to do is to get people slightly earlier. So at the
Mhm.
point you're making a decision to apply, there is something there that isn't to try to stop you, but is, I guess, to get you to pause for a moment and really consider what the implications might be.
Definitely agree with that. And because also the environment, it's highly emotionally charged. People come to the Samaritans looking for emotional support as well. And with volunteers, that's got to be something that you're actually really happy for to do. Like you said, lived experience, a lot of people. That may not be for everybody, but it sounds like you are attracting great talent. And it's really refreshing again to hear that you're actually thinking of doing that even earlier. So when you've got an environment that is quite emotionally charged, how do you make sure that your team do get the support so that they don't face burnout?
Yes, I think it's important to be really clear about what we mean in terms of emotional nature, because it's not in terms of the environment. It's actually, we try to be quite calm. The way that I mean, I've been through the training and I've seen our volunteers in action, and actually they bring a very calming, reassuring tone to the conversations that they hold with our callers. But there is a need for us to really truly understand what the potential impact is of working in an organization like ours, and how do we create an environment where we are really clear around what our expectations are of our people, but what the support is in place, and how do you equip managers so they can have the right kinds of conversations. So, our volunteers are supported by other volunteers, our staff are supported by managers, and how do we work towards a place where actually we are having an appropriate balance in relation to checking in on an individual's well-being and how they are doing, as well as maintaining that boundary of where our responsibility as an employer starts and stops. And I think trying to I think we're working on navigating that and getting to a place. So I wouldn't by any means suggest that we've got it perfect and we've got it nailed, but we are consciously aware of what we want to have in place and how we want to try to give a good quality experience to all of our people.
And as part of your role, I noticed online as well, particularly on LinkedIn around attraction and retention, you were talking then about equipping managers. As part of the people strategy, have you included to equip managers, and what does that look like from a very foundational basis? What are things that you're doing?
Yes, I think we've just rolled out a set of kind of like leadership principles where we talk about four key things for our managers to think about. So we talk to them about are you really clear on what you're accountable for and the accountability you have? Are you really able to empower your teams to enable them to deliver? Are you thinking about creating an inclusive environment that feels psychologically safe and that people feel able to bring their best selves? And are you thinking about connections, or are you connecting with other teams across the organization and with our volunteer base where it might be appropriate? And we've taken the next step. Now we're rolling that out to all of our colleagues. So those people who aren't in managerial roles, in part to say, well, if you become a manager here, this is some of the key principles that we follow, but also these are the things you can expect from your managers. So we're trying to build an environment where we've got that conversation. We're evolving our performance processes so that we move away from it feeling like a bit of a tick box, kind of like an annual check, kind of like almost like a tick sheet. Have we done these things? Yes, you have. Well done. Congratulations. There's your sticker. Moving away from that, much more to meaningful conversations that take place on a monthly basis, where you might have an aggregate conversation at the end of the year where you look back, but actually in the moment, as you're moving through stuff, you're talking about what's working well, where you might need more support, what help you might need in order to grow, what your career ambitions are. And I think our biggest thing that we are moving towards is that we are a relatively small staff team. We're only about 300 people. And I think a lot of organizations try to hold on to people. There's kind of like, we're going to strap you in, we're going to handcuff you to the radio, you're not going anywhere. And I just think that's unrealistic. I think when people come into an organization, they'll have their own career ambitions. And when you're as small as we are, I mean, it's not we're tiny, but there's not as many progression pathways and development opportunities for people. So getting our managers to a place where they can have those conversations about where do you want to get to and how can we help and support you to get there. And then hopefully we become a really positive part of their career journey. And if we're really lucky, some of them might boomerang back later on.
And some employees come for a season. I think that's the thing where organizations are sometimes so particular on we want to keep them for as long as possible. But would you rather have someone who's there for the sake of being there, or someone who's actually going to have a really good impact and growth opportunity over a shorter period of time? There is also a lot of conversations happening at the moment around career progression. And I think one of the best things that we can do as organizations is develop new skills that might not necessarily come with progression as we typically think in terms of title increase of more seniority, but people are looking for more skills. So I think as an organization, if we can include that, that's a really good retention, but equally a great experience. You just said then you want to be a good marker as part of someone's career journey. I think more and more people should take that outlook.
No, absolutely. And I think that the horizontal element is often overlooked. I think we've become fixated and fascinated by hierarchical progression. I think we have unfortunately decided to give someone one direct report to make them a manager, rather than thinking about actually, does that person have the capabilities to manage people? And are they going to be at their best if they are? And actually, do we just want to recognize their technical skill? So I think there are lots of things that we could do differently to create an environment whereby people are able to realize what their ambitions are. And that might be, I want to stay at this level, but deepen my skill and my expertise. And I'm actually very happy in this organization. And that's equally okay. So it's not like you have to move on, you have to be progressing, but it's, I think, having a better balance and blend of what an individual's choices might be and how you support them with those.
And I can imagine as well the 4 leadership behaviors that you spoke about before have helped to bring clarity to that, because I also find where a disconnect is, some managers think that because they've progressed into a managerial role, that everybody else in their team also has those desires and aspirations, which may not be the case for people, but yet we can still get the most out of each other. I love where we're going now actually with this conversation around future focus. You started then a little bit to talk around performance and how it's more important to have meaningful conversation than a tick box annual review or a biannual where we reflect on the last 6 months and I can't remember what I did.
Yeah.
It's more important to have meaningful conversations. Is there anything else that you're building as a people strategy to be more future focused at the Samaritans, particularly with volunteers and your team members of 300 employees?
Yeah, so I think there is an element around we kind of accepted the way that world of work was up until the pandemic. The concept of remote and hybrid working was like, just didn't happen. And then the pandemic happened and then everything changed overnight. And I feel a sense of sadness about those organizations that are trying to return back to what we had before and aren't thinking about what are the new opportunities that we can embrace. So, we have these bizarre conversations about water cooler moments. Yet I remember in my early career that if I was caught at a water cooler talking to somebody else, I would be sent, back to my desk to get on with some proper work. And so there is an element of, I think we fool ourselves in terms of why things were the way they were. And actually, I think employees created mechanisms to be proactive, to be productive, to deliver in the environment that they were in. And all I feel we need to do now is we need to think about, okay, we're in a new environment. How do we take the advantages and the benefits? We're able to offer much more flexibility. There's greater opportunities, I think, for people to be innovative. People who might have struggled being in a physical workplace 5 days a week are probably likely to be more productive now. There are so many positive elements that have come from where we are now. And yes, there are some things that we've lost. So, how do you build a consistent organizational culture if you're predominantly hybrid or remote? How do you build a sense of connection and collaboration and relationships within your teams? How do you encourage innovation and ensure that people think more broadly and horizontally about what the opportunities might be rather than fixating on the task at hand? So there are new problems. And we just need to think about what are the solutions to those problems so we can take the best of the evolution that we've experienced and move on. So we're looking at, thinking about that virtual world.
Yes.
How do we create meaningful ways to connect virtually? How do we, when we meet in person? So our hybrid working policy is not fixated on a number of days and set location. It's focused around how do we deliver. There's certain kinds of things that we need to do in person, like in relation to our relationships or thinking creatively. So here are some moments when we feel it would be advantageous for people to come together. And so, I think generating and driving more freedom to people within that accountability framework, I think will make a big difference. And the one thing I'll just finish on is I believe very strongly in what I was taught a while ago. I was doing my OD training, which was draw me a dog leadership. And so I will say to you, draw me a dog. And so I'm very clear that I want it to be a drawing. I don't want a sculpture. I don't want some kind of like interpretive dance. I don't want a painting. I want a drawing and I want a dog. I'm not interested in penguins or, otters or kind of like emus or any other animal. Right, I want a dog. But within that, you've got freedom. You can pick whatever breed of dog you want. You can figure out, what kind of style of drawing you want to do. And so I think that there is an opportunity for us to create more space, freedom and encouragement and empowerment for our people by being clear about the parameters, but then given the opportunity to express themselves within that.
And what impact do you think that will have on attraction and retention?
Well, my hope is that our approach to work people will start to talk about it. People will start to hear about it. The talent that we supported to progress will start telling other people about it. My aim is that Samaritans becomes the destination, the employer of choice, irrespective of where you're at in your career, that you will feel you can come, work for a really great cause, deliver significant, meaningful impact to millions of people, and have the opportunity to grow and progress in a way that you might not get with other employers.
That's incredible. I love it. I want to talk a little bit around the volunteers that you've got currently. We were talking earlier, there are thousands, and by thousands, we were talking about 20,000. There's a lot of volunteers that you got. When we're looking to the future and being more future focused, whilst also being people centric with that flexibility element and building more of a culture fit for a virtual team, how are you finding building a culture for volunteers who may not be there if we think of a full-time equivalent in terms of hours? How are you building a culture for them?
So I think that the important thing for us is that, our volunteers are within branches. The branches are led by, a series of volunteers. And so, we do have a whole ecosystem of different cultures, because the leadership in those environments, those local geographic locations, will determine what the culture is. I think there are some shared values that we've got, particularly in the delivery of our service. And I think they are particularly strong and well understood. But I think how we work together, both as, within the volunteering population, but our staff and volunteers, is work that we need to do to improve. And also we need to recognise that the world of volunteering is changing. So the way that people used to want to volunteer, often, you'd have these really strong communities. I've seen it throughout my career, really strong communities of people with a shared kind of like mindset, shared endeavour, that come together. And actually there's a really strong social element to their volunteering, as well as a delivery element. Whereas more and more increasingly, we're starting to see people who actually just want to volunteer to do the volunteering. They just want that bit. They're not so much interested in the social bit. And I think that we need to embrace the fact that, how people want to volunteer and the nature of volunteering is evolving, but to do so in a way that doesn't discredit or devalue the preferences of those people that have given us decades worth of support. And I think the challenge for people in roles like mine is, how do you create an environment that allows those two things to sit comfortably with each other and allows you to organically evolve your organisation without creating unnecessary or undue tension?
And what have you identified as a way to kind of pull those two together? Have you had any feedback or anything recently for that?
I think there is. I think a lot of organisations struggle with a kind of misperception around, from those two audiences, around kind of what their motivations are, around openness to, or willingness to adapt and to change and to evolve. And I think a lot of it stems from maybe getting too fixated in their own rational, logical arguments, and not being sufficiently empathetic to the reasons why people might have different perspectives. And we've seen it as it plays out in society. Brexit is a classic case in point, that it split the nation, but it's not binary. There is a nuance there, a nuance that perhaps we weren't sufficiently ready and willing to explore. And so I think it's the same thing. It's that at the end of the day, we are here so that fewer people die by suicide. But we recognise there are different interpretations about how we might deliver that, how we might realise that. And I think moving us forward as an organisation to a place where actually we are crystal clear in terms of how we're trying to deliver that, and that mission and the vision, but also that everyone, whether they're a staff member or a volunteer, understands the role that they play to help us on that, so they feel part of something much bigger than themselves, is enormously powerful.
Which goes back to then the clarity, and you were talking earlier around the shared values that you have internally, which is the thread that a lot of people miss, to then tying people back into why they're there for the organisation, what impact they're having on the organisation. And I'd love that that is such a priority for you at the Samaritans, because what you're doing is incredibly powerful and it's very inspirational as well. When you were talking around the future and preparing for the future, it did make me think around AI and what is the future actually going to look like for volunteers. But I think the big pieces in the new world that is going to happen, it's all around the impact and the value that machines can't add. And I think with volunteering, a machine can't do that. Like, in my opinion, anyway, someone potentially could challenge that and maybe have a different opinion, but that's where I think maybe the understanding of perception of volunteer will change, but the true nature and the why you're doing that, I don't know if that ever will.
Yeah, I mean, I remember when I was at NSPCC, there were a whole load of services. And I remember there was one story that really stuck with me about a young lad who was having a really, really challenging home life. and there was a volunteer who was a driver, and effectively the role of the volunteer driver was to take that young lad from one location to have his therapeutic support service and then take them back home. And I remember that he has such a strong connection with that volunteer driver. And the reason he had a strong connection with him was because he was the only person in his life that he felt genuinely cared about him but wasn't paid to do so. And so the power of volunteering in that environment was that here is someone who's genuinely giving up their time for me. And I think that is an enormous benefit, and in terms of why people potentially reach out to our service. So I think, our commitment is that, human to human connection is incredibly important. I did a bit of research when I was at National Trust looking at the future, and actually there is we are better connected now than we've ever been, but we also probably feel more distant and lack that human connection more so than we ever have. And so there is enormous power in technology and digital enhancements and artificial intelligence, and there are ways in which we can try to apply that to improve what we do. But at the moment, for me, the risk with AI is it is a solution looking for a problem, and we haven't been really clear around what are the problems we're trying to solve, and actually genuinely, can AI solve those problems? And I think the power of someone in emotional crisis feeling like they've got nowhere to go, nowhere to turn to, and phoning and speaking to one of our volunteers is enormously powerful. And yeah, I share your view that I don't think that any form of AI or machine can replicate that. And there's a debate raging on LinkedIn at the moment around AI coaching and how some people are saying it's the next thing, it's going to transform the universe because it's always there and always ready for you. And other people are saying, yeah, but someone's had to program that, someone's had to teach it. And so is it really responding to your needs, or is it just very cleverly programmed to help you navigate some of the challenges? And then if you hit something where it's not ready, or might it guide you down a path that might not be the path for you, because it doesn't know you as an individual? It's just got a general assumption around what direction people want to go in.
And that's the thing with AI, it's pattern recognition. So
Yeah.
we've got to be very careful with it. And I agree. And also, retrospectively, for someone who is phoning the Samaritans, do they want to be greeted with an AI programmed tool? No, they're looking for that human connection. Exactly what you just said with the example of the driver. It is that humanity piece that not a lot of people now have in our lives. And I definitely agree that post-COVID, we're longing for that. In terms of operational functions at work, I actually think AI has helped me to be a better professional and more human than I have been previously. But I also think there's such parameters that we need to be very, very mindful of. So with the charity, and in particular people's strategy, what is one thing for 2025, or if we look ahead for 2026, that you would share for somebody to start to prioritize?
Oh, wow. And I think for us, there's a lot that we are trying to do about both understanding and clarifying our position on wellbeing. And I think there is an important need. So I think there's a wider conversation about wellbeing. There's lots of organisation out there doing a whole load of transactional stuff. It's just kind of like, yeah, we're giving pizza on a Tuesday. That will help their wellbeing. And it's like, that's not going to work. Because actually at the heart, the nub of it, all roads always lead back to culture.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the culture of your organisation? Is it one that is supportive? Is it one that is developmental? Is it one where people feel safe to fail, safe to experiment, safe to explore, where people can be vulnerable, can look for and actively seek feedback? And I think part of the challenge is maybe in lots of the organisations that I've worked in, particularly that last point around vulnerability and feedback, we're very nice. So, you have these very nice, lovely people talk about kind of like working in a chat. Oh, it's lovely, it's very nice. But actually, you can still be, you can be kind, but kindness might be around giving some constructive feedback that helps someone to grow and develop. Kindness might be about sharing your honest and open reflections about a potential project and helping it to deliver more to the service users. Kindness is about thinking, my work's not as important as yours, so we're going to put our effort and our resources to helping you achieve your goals because it will be better for the people that rely and depend on us. So I think a shift maybe in terms of our thinking about clarifying what's the culture that will serve both our service users and enable our people to be their most productive and best selves that we need. And then how do we then transition from where we are now to that place?
I love that. I'm also going to jump on the nice, kind bandwagon because I was speaking on a panel last week and somebody asked the question, how do I overcome a culture where I've built it to be nice because I've been in fear of a difficult conversation where we're on the other end of the spectrum compared to being kind? And I said, very similar to what you've just said then. We should always be kind within work, and being kind to somebody is pulling them up and saying like, hey, here is how you can grow, rather than being nice and avoiding the conversation. It's actually not an enabler for them. And when I was talking last week, I was speaking around there are moments that aren't particularly nice, like having a difficult conversation, but how we can be kind during that is being quite direct with the feedback. We can bring them a bottle of water, tissues, have their emergency contact on hand. That's how we can be kind in situations that aren't overly nice. And I think that's the thing with work. A lot of people have gone too far on the other end of the spectrum with it, but that's actually not healthy for anybody internally. The question when it came though, I had a few people ask me afterwards, but how do we actually start to shift that culture from being kind rather than nice? So is there anything that as a strategy that you've done that's really helped to enable that?
I think it starts with managers. So I think if you can get your managers into a place where they are more willing to be vulnerable, they are more willing to be open about their challenges, that they strike a good balance around the feedback they give, both in terms of positive, affirmative, as well as constructive.
Yeah.
If they start to do that, and then what that does, and you do it regularly through your conversations that you have, and having a set structure to your conversation. So I know as an employee coming into a conversation with my manager, there is going to be space. We're going to be talking about the things I'm particularly proud of that have gone particularly well and what I've learned from it. But there's equally going to be space where we're going to talk about, some things I might find more challenging or some development needs that I've got. If that becomes the norm, then people become comfortable. It's the same with kind of flexible working practices. Is that for years, for decades, we relied on the individual to say, I need X.
Yeah.
And therefore you're placing the demand on them to put their hand up and say, I need help. But if you normalize a conversation regularly, say, look, is there anything that we need to do? How are things with you? Are there any things we need to do differently? Then it means that at the point that individual might have something where they need some support, they know it's okay to ask. And so I think for me, the number one thing, if you want to shift from a nice to a kind environment and culture, you start with your managers, you equip them, but your most senior leaders are the key ones that need to role model it, and then it will start to cascade and flush through your whole organisation.
Are they the leadership capabilities that you would say are really needed for that psychological safety piece?
I think definitely. I think there's an element around curiosity, but I think definitely a willingness to be vulnerable and skills around coaching and having coaching conversations, I think are underplayed. I mean, how many managers do you have in your workforce, and how many of them have you trained and developed in relation to coaching? But yet, how important do we feel coaching is? Because when you get to the exec level, it's all about, oh, have you got a coach? Let's get you some coaching support. Yeah. So why does that become the reserve of the people at the top of the organisation? We don't think it's important for those further down. So, yeah, I think the vulnerability element, managers who are curious and are seeking to understand, the ability to coach, and also I think an acceptance that the way I do it, or I would choose to do it, might not be the way that you choose to do it, and that's okay. As long as I'm clear around what I'm asking you to do and the outcomes that I'm looking for, you find your own way. And actually I might learn something from how you approach it, rather than trying to direct you and steer you, almost like kind of like backseat drive on your behalf.
The piece then where you just said that I might actually learn as a manager, I think is so important. A lot of people think they've got to have all the answers. That's not our role. Like, as a leader, we make even better leaders. That's what we do. We enable others to thrive because there's no I in team, and it's not all about us. It's about the people who are in our charge. I absolutely love that. Unfortunately, I've only got one last question for you. And I really want to reflect on in your sporting days when you were then moving into the people space. So looking back on your career, what is one piece of advice that you would give your younger self?
Oh God. I think it would be it's something that I did anyway, but I'd say it's embrace the opportunities.
Mm.
I think I read Richard Branson's book. I can't remember which one it was, but the book where he says, if someone gives you an opportunity, provides you an opportunity, and you don't know how to do it and find out later. Say yes and find out later. That mindset, and I think that has served me well, particularly early in my career, because there's a huge amount of stuff that I've learned. Some of it by getting things wrong, but by having the courage to try stuff. If I'd been a bit more rational or a bit more considered or a bit more mindful, I might go, I'm not quite sure I know how to do that. So yeah, it would definitely be that.
Very inspiring as well. I think a lot of people have that fear of, oh, I've not done it before, therefore I won't do it. But how on earth are we supposed to grow?
No,
So we
exactly.
take that mindset, like we're just going to be
Exactly right.
stunted and stay in that lane. But I think that is a very good point. And if anyone hasn't read that book, definitely should. Tiger, honestly, thank you so much for this conversation. It's been really refreshing to actually hear about all the strategies that you're implementing whilst being people-centric, charity first, but also future-focused at the same time. So thank you so much.
No, thanks for having me.
Like this episode? Click here for more HR talk. And if you're just catching up, check out our previous episodes right here.